Then we have Jean-Henri Fragonard. Fragonard, he is much more of a late Rococo painter. You see, he died in 1806. Known for his aristocratic genre paintings, in which he celebrates hedonism, intimacy, and he has a veiled eroticism in his work, right? Like there's some of that there, right? We just talked about the veiled eroticism there, but in Fragonard's work, it's a little more overt. It's still veiled, but it's a little more overt. Like this painting that we've already looked at least briefly, The Swing from 1766. All right. So, again, all of the earmarks, all the characteristics of Rococo are here. Those creamy pastel colors. Look at that pink dress, those pastel blues and greens, right? Not a ton of super dark shadow like the Baroque had. We have an asymmetrical composition. We had that a little bit in Watteau's piece here too, right? Look at how he sort of shoved everything down in the lower portion of the painting, and then really over here in like the lower right of the painting. Fragonard's doing a similar thing in that there's sort of a line that we can follow that sort of cuts the whole painting at a diagonal. Right? And most of the important stuff that's happening is happening in the lower half. Right? So, very asymmetrical composition. We have little Pooty, right? There's these down here, there's one up here. And we have the aristocracy engaging in frivolity. So, what is the scene that we have going on here? Right? Again, it's beautiful and ornate. It looks like something important must be happening, right? The trees grow up into the sky. The sun is shining through it. As I say, Greek gods have shown up, Greek and Roman gods have shown up to witness this event. And it's a young woman on a swing, right? But there's more going on. And you can always assume with Fragonard that there is more going on than what you see on the surface. Because Fragonard was, again, being patronized. And I use that term as in, a patron, a person who buys work. His patrons were those aristocratic women that we were talking about who would have this work often in love nests and boudoirs and things of that nature. So sex is often a theme in his work. And so although this may not seem overtly sexual to you, well, there's something that's going on in here if we look into the details just a bit more. All right? So we have a young lady who is on the swing, but we also have a couple other figures other than the statues of, our different Greek and Roman gods here. We have this gentleman back here who is wearing clothing that suggests that he is of the clergy. All right? And he is pulling on these two ropes right here that are keeping the swing going. Well, this man, not young, but this man seems to be in the process of trying to set up a love match for these two individuals. And so he has set up a scenario here where he is pulling the swing to get this woman going on the swing so that this young man, who is no doubt interested in this young lady, can get himself a real nice upskirt shot. That's what he wants to see. But then the suggestion is that she isn't entirely innocent in this situation. She is giving him a look like, yeah, I know you're down there. And she's even kicked off her shoe, which is going to go flying so this man can go find her shoe and heroically return it to her, right? Like a good gentleman should. Never mind the fact that he was just staring up her dress moments before. And then again, like I said, we have these little putti, right, equated with the god of love, and we even have one who is shushing us, like, shh, don't tell what's happening here. Shh, this is our secret, right? Oi, that's Fragonard for you. That kind of veiled eroticism continues into a painting like this, The Lock, from that he painted somewhere between 1776 and 1779. Which again is filled with sexual innuendo, things that are problematic to us today, but at the time, like, I don't know, I find it strange sometimes when I look at particularly Fragonard's work to think that this was work that was paid for by women, because I don't always like the way the women are being treated in his work. This one in particular, right, where this young woman seems to have been sleeping in her bed, and this gentleman has come in, clearly mad for love, and has woken her up in the night, has grabbed her off the bed, and is now reaching up here to lock the door. Why would he need to lock the door? Well, to keep anyone who might hear what's about to happen in this room from coming in. Because she is giving at least the visual, the physical body language of no, stop, don't. She's even kind of reaching up to like, no, don't lock the door, right? She's resisting. But we look at her face and it's also kind of a passive resistance. It's like, oh, no, don't. Whatever you do, don't stop. Like, there's this sense that she is both not wanting this to happen, but part of her does want this to happen. And even though what we're looking at could very well be a sexual assault, if depending on how consent is being ascertained here, the painting itself would have been meant to be humorous. Like, oh, yeah, I know why he's reaching for that lock. Oh, and look at her. She's pretending to resist, but she really wants it. Like that kind of thing. And it's icky. It's gross. It bugs me. But at the time, right, again, I don't understand sometimes when I think about this, how it was that it was the women who were the ones commissioning work like this, because I don't like how she's being treated there. She's being treated as this object who has at least some autonomy. She's trying. She's putting up a little bit of a fight. But the joke seems to be that the fight she's putting up is one that she feels obliged to put up, right? Not that she genuinely does not want this to happen. She wants this as much as he does. She just knows how she's supposed to act as a lady, right? But as I say, there were those who criticized this artwork even in its own time, right? This is not just something that I'm looking back and criticizing it for. All right, there were those who criticized it at the time. Their criticisms, though, are the ones I was just talking about a moment ago that I feel like I want to defend Rococo against. And it was often referred to as the feminizing of art. So we're going to talk about the Rococo, the saloniers, the women patrons, and some of the women artists in 18th century France. So the salons, let me move myself over here where I'm in the way. Now, I put this in parentheses as a private gathering because we're going to talk about another kind of salon in France, which is going to set itself up as a national version to counter this. So a salon in this context refers to gatherings in the homes of wealthy aristocrats in and around Paris that were held at regularly scheduled intervals. At the salons, there were intellectual topics were discussed, such as Well, I don't have them on there. I thought I had them there. All right, so they would discuss things like science, mathematics, philosophy, art, etc. Interesting thing about them, however, is that they would be facilitated by a salonier. Salonier was the lady or the madam of the house. These women, the saloniers, became often nearly as powerful, or in some cases even more powerful than their male counterparts at the time. And so women could not at this point attend universities. That was still a thing. So the salon became this way for women to get an informal university education. Now, the saloniers, they would choose the topics for the salons. Right? So a salonier, she would say, all right, I'm going to have a gathering. I'm going to have a salon on such and such date. Right? And we're going to discuss these particular scientific things that are happening right now. We are going to discuss this particular piece of artwork. We're going to discuss this particular philosophy. Right? And then she would reach out to people who would be knowledgeable on those subjects to come and speak at her salon. And then she would send out invitations for anyone who wanted to attend. And both men and women would attend. And again, these were held in the sitting rooms and boudoirs of the saloniers. So this again became a way for women to gain knowledge from experienced teachers, but also to have some discourse, because the women could speak and debate if they wanted to as well. Now, so we have this painting here of a salon that's happening, but damn it, if the Rococo painters can't help themselves from injecting a little bit of sexuality in there, in that you have these two, right, who are eyeballing each other and not paying attention at all to the topic being discussed. They're sort of like, hey, yeah, how you doing? Kind of vibe happening over here. Things haven't changed in our current colleges and universities. All right, so if we ever want to really see just how important the saloniers were, we can look at how they chose to be depicted. So this is Madame de Pompadour, painted by a Rococo painter by the name of Francois Boucher in 1750. Right? And certainly there's all that Rococo nature going on here, right? All the characteristics of the Rococo. There are these gorgeous pastel colors that are happening, that dress, right? In those blues and greens and rose pinks, even the yellowy gold that's happening in both the drapery and in the furniture toward the back. There's even a little poodle up there next to the clock. And how she has chosen to present herself. She hasn't presented herself as just, don't get me wrong, she's wearing that lovely, gorgeous dress. She certainly wants us to see her as feminine, right? She's not trying to buck any conventions in that way. She wants to look beautiful and feminine in the style of the time in which she lives. But she also represents herself by having a bookcase in the back filled with books that we have to assume she has read, a book in her hand that she is currently reading. And by the way, this is a mirror behind her, as you can see with her reflected head. So the books are actually across from her. So she's paused for a moment of reflection. She's clearly just read something and needs to pause to think about it. She's a thinking woman. And not only that, her little table over here to the side has a candle and an inkwell and paper for writing letters. Right? And yes, she's surrounded with flowers. Yes, she has a little dog to suggest that she is a faithful wife. Whether she was or not, it's whatever. She's surrounded with the frilly things that showcases her wealth as well. But she wants us to see her as an intelligent, well-read woman of letters who writes and thinks about things, right? And that's that's really interesting because it's this period of time, excuse me, in 18th century aristocratic France where women start to gain a little autonomy, and can see themselves as intellectuals who should be respected as equals to their male counterparts. And that is part of why the Rococo is being criticized at the time, right? Because, well, we'll get to it, but there are those who look at that and see that as unnatural. We'll get to that in a moment. As I've been mentioning, right, a lot of this artwork was showcased in ladies' boudoirs. That's what this would be right here. It's called the Boucher Room, because Boucher designed it. It's in the Frick collection in New York now, but this would have been a room in a aristocratic palace at the time that Boucher would have designed, and painted the paintings, as you can see, around all around it. Now, this is like a panoramic shot to get a nice wide range, right? And this is where this artwork was meant to be displayed, right? It wasn't being created to go into the big galleries of France. It wasn't going to the churches, right? The churches were losing a lot of their power anyway, right? It was meant, its destination and where it was meant to be viewed was in the ladies' boudoirs, because again, the women, this is where they had control. This was the art that they were buying and commissioning. This is the place where it has to be put on display. And so when a salon would be held in a place like this, you would be surrounded by this artwork. A lot of the artwork would get discussed on an intellectual level, as well as whatever other subjects were being chosen for the salon. But again, that was part of the problem for those who were criticizing it at the time. But not only that, as I say, there were also women artists, who were working in the Rococo style. And this also was a means for those who wanted to criticize Rococo. Really understand that a lot of the criticisms that were being lobbed at Rococo at the time were really just sort of misplaced criticisms of the aristocracy. There were a lot of people who had problems with the aristocracy and how they lived. And so that sort of got skewed toward the Rococo. And so one way of criticizing it was that there were so many women involved in it, right? And it was unnatural for women to be in these positions that should be reserved for a man. The saloniers standing in the place of what should be a university professor's place. And a university professor would have been male at the time, right? Trying to educate these women. Women were not allowed in the universities. And not only that, but they were purchasing this artwork from women who are making art. Women who are doing men's work by going in and painting. That is something that only men should do, damn it. What are these women doing so unnaturally performing such a thing, right? And so there were a lot of women artists in the Rococo. And one we can take a look at here is Elizabeth Louise Vichet-Lebrun, which I struggle with the French on her name. Vichet-Lebrun. She's generally considered Rococo, but she also, in her work, shows a little bit of interest in neoclassical painting, which we'll dive into in a bit. But she's not considered a pure neoclassicist, since she created mostly portraits of the aristocracy in a very Rococo kind of style. And once the French Revolution happens, and people start coming for the heads of the aristocracy, she had to flee France with her daughter in hand, and she left for Rome, where she became a pretty well sought after artist there, right? But she was so connected to the aristocracy that when the revolution happened, she needed to get out of town for fear for her own life. So this is a portrait that she did of Marie Antoinette with her children. And we're going to dive into the French Revolution a little bit in the next lecture that you'll have from me. But understand, Marie Antoinette is the queen at the time, and she is the one toward whom a lot of the ire of the revolutionists will be aimed. They are they see her as sort of personifying everything that they hate about the royalty and the aristocracy. And here is Vigée Lebrun painting a portrait of Marie Antoinette and her children. In 1787, it's only 2 years away from the revolution. So it seems like Vigée Lebrun is specifically trying to humanize Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette is in many ways, is unfairly maligned at the time, right? Again, she is seen as emblematic of everything that those who are starting to have revolutionary thoughts have a problem with. They feel like she's disconnected with the people, things of that nature. So what is Vigée Lebrun doing here? Well, she is painting her as a motherly figure, trying to humanize her, right? Show her caring children surrounding her. Show her it's still a palace, but for the most part, fairly humble surroundings, right? We're not showing off a huge amount of wealth surrounding her. And let the people see what a kind and loving mother she is, so that maybe you can identify with her a bit more. And here's the thing. Only somebody like Vigée Lebrun could have painted something like this. Because any man who would have painted this would have had to have gone into Marie Antoinette's private chambers, and that would have been considered unsightly for a man to do. Man shouldn't be in there unless the purposes are for sex. We all know that we're not going to, we know that stuff's happening, we're just not going to talk about it, right? But if a man paints something like this, the indication is, he was in the most private spaces of this woman. Ooh, and that suggests, like, are they like lovers? Is she and this painter a lover? Oh my goodness, scandal, right? But another woman, like Vigée Lebrun, could enter this space and paint an intimate portrait of Marie Antoinette and try to humanize her a bit. Now, as I said, there were criticisms that were lobbed at the Rococo and at the aristocracy in general at the time. We'll look at two people in particular, William Hogarth and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and how they went about criticizing the people, the places, all of it. So, William Hogarth, he was a satirical artist of the time. His paintings and his etchings that would often go into newspapers and things of that nature. And understand, he's British. He's not French. But in Britain, the same kind of things are happening amongst the aristocracy. His work is going to be a satirical critique of what he sees as people who are getting so self-involved that they've forgotten about the rest of us. And so he does something like this painting, Morning Party from Marriage à la Mode. This was a series of paintings he did called Marriage à la Mode from 1743 to 1747. And it was a series of paintings meant to critique the loosey-goosey ideology when it came to monogamy that the aristocracy had at the time. And so this particular painting, Morning Party, oh my goodness. You gotta Hogarth, he's funny. He's funny. I may not necessarily agree with what he's trying to critique here, but I do like his humor. So notice that he's painted this in a very good approximation of the Rococo style. He's using a lot of the same characteristics in this painting. The story that seems to be happening before us here is it appears that we're sort of in either a lady's boudoir or some sort of sitting room, something of that nature. And this lady right here would be the lady of the house, who is over here having conversations with this gentleman who seems to be either clergy or maybe a government official of some sort. And look at their body language. These two are all into each other. They are loving it, right? And it's called the morning party. We can assume that these two, it's morning, so it is probably the morning after these two have had themselves a little tryst overnight. Why can we assume that? Well, because over here, right, sipping on his morning tea, is the gentleman of the house, and look at all these horns popping out of his head. All right, so you've heard the term, I'm sure, a cuckold. A cuckold is a husband whose wife sleeps around on him. Right? So called because the sort of folklore of it is that when your wife sleeps with someone else, you grow these horns. You become cuckolded by growing horns on your head. And these horns can be seen by everybody but you. You can't see them. Everybody else knows they're there. So this poor gentleman not only has horns growing out of his head, he's got a ton of horns growing out of his head. This lady over here has had herself quite a few lovers. Right? And then we're just sort of shown the rest of these people who are sitting in here as being snobbish. Right? Their paintings on the wall are goofy. Like the bed that all this must have happened in is right there. And so Hogarth is like, dude, like these people are all sitting around pretending like they aren't in the same room where this woman, a married woman, and this dude right here just boinked in that little space right up back there. It's right there. And everybody's just hanging around and having conversation and pretending that they're learned individuals while the cuckold bed is right there. Right? That's Hogarth. Because Hogarth would look at that and would see the aristocracy as getting so caught up in themselves they've forgotten about the little guy, and I get his critique there. But B, he also sees the sort of upside down, topsy-turvy nature of how men and women are a bit more equals in the gender roles as being unnatural. And he's not the only one. Jean-Jacques Rousseau here, understand, he's considered an intellectual of the time. He was an 18th century writer and intellectual. And you'll often get a lot of his writings as a background leading up to the French Revolution, right? Right now, I'm going to talk about something else about his. All right. So, but let's talk about the fact that he's going to be a leader that brings about the French Revolution. He is looking at the aristocracy, the royalty, the nobles, and feels like they have completely and utterly forgotten about the everyday man living in France. In order to bring people's attention to that, he's got to point out how everything about their lifestyle is wrong. So he's going to look around at the women who are gaining power and influence in the aristocracy and is going to, in his writings, say that is unnatural, right? The natural state of the world should be that men are the ones in control, right? And that women should be subservient to men. This is Rousseau's way of thinking. And he says that's detrimental to the middle class. He's like, how do you middle class people live, right? You marry the woman you love, And the man takes care of her, the woman takes care of the house. That's the way it's intended. That's how it should be done. And we middle class people are the ones who should be the ones making the decisions around here. There's a whole lot more of us than there are of them. And what they're doing is detrimental to our way of life and our lifestyle. So he's a proponent of the natural roles for men and women. These, again, he's a member of, he's an Enlightenment individual, right? So he's looking back at ancient Greece and Rome, and he sees their way of life as being the height of morality, as I said way back at the beginning of this lecture. So he starts basing these ideas on ancient Roman models. Think about, those of you who are familiar with your Bible, right? Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, right, as letters to churches, Paul was a Roman citizen. So when you read some of his letters, you get a sense of how Romans viewed the roles, the gender roles of men and women, because Paul will talk about how generally in church, I ask for the women not to speak, right? If a man is talking and a woman has something she'd like to say, she should first tap her husband and get his permission, and then she should speak. Those are the kinds of things that Paul's writing about, but that's because Paul is a Roman. He's a Roman citizen, and he would have grown up in the kind of thinking that now Jean-Jacques Rousseau is looking back at. Women, he says, should be involved in the domestic sphere. They should be in submissive roles, and they should take care of things that happen in the home. And he says men belong in the public sphere, where they should be laboring or they should be in intellectual pursuits. They should not be taking care of the home, and women should not be out either laboring or pursuing intellectual pursuits. And that's exactly what's happening in the aristocracy. So he takes specific issue with Rococo art, which he sees as being immoral. He takes issue with the private salons because he says, nope, the nation should be the one who decides how education is done. And he takes issue with the Sauniers and sort of sees them as the enemy because there are these women who participate in all these things that he says are unnatural. And again, yes, he says all of this is immoral. It is immoral for women to be doing these things. It is immoral that these paintings are being made that showcase themes that are sexual in nature, or at the very least, they don't seem to be teaching any kind of a moral lesson, right? Rousseau will call for art to teach morals. Some of it's being made by women, and so that's immoral. And he is the one who comes up with this term and says that what the Rococo has done, it has become the feminization of art. That's such a dirty way of putting it, right? He's saying because these women are involved in the patronage and in deciding the subjects of the artwork, and then the artists, either the men are putting themselves in a submissive role to that woman who has requested of him what she would like him to paint, or she's a woman herself, and that's wrong and immoral. That these people are taking art and making it women's work. They're reducing it to just tripe that women are creating. Women are making it for women, right? So when he speaks of the feminization of art, it is a pejorative term. He's not speaking of it as if that's a good thing. Rousseau says that stuff's immoral. That's where I want to put my dukes up and defend Rococo. I may not be able to stand the stuff, right? It may not be for me. But I'll be damned if I will also go along with Rousseau's criticism here that it is immoral art and that it shouldn't be created, and that the reason that it is immoral and that it is grotesque and that it shouldn't exist. The reason for all that is because women are the ones who are doing it. The women are the ones who are ruining it. I can't get behind that at all. All right, but that's Rousseau for you. So now we arrive at neoclassicism. This is the second of the two art styles that were particularly big in France at the time. It's a rejection of the Baroque and the Rococo, and it was sort of considered art for the age of reason. So neoclassicism. Neoclassicism developed as an artistic style that rejected what they saw as the immorality, the femininity, and the purely decorative purposes of the Rococo. They were heavily influenced by that renewed interest in classical antiquity that we talked about, that sort of resurged at this particular moment in time. The virtues that were advocated by neoclassical art were democracy, morality, and independent thought. Now, again, these would have all been considered in opposition to the aristocracy and all of its virtues and values. This is being championed much more by this large, burgeoning middle class, known as the bourgeois. The characteristics. How can we identify neoclassicism when we see it? There's going to be a focus on ancient Greek and Roman mythology, history, and design. A lot of their design elements start coming out of things that were discovered at Pompeii and Herculaneum, and the way that painters of ancient Rome painted many of the murals that were found in those places. It was also very stern and moral, and you can see how that would set it up in opposition to Rococo, right? Neoclassicism wants to be very serious, stern, and moral, in that lessons are going to be taught in this work, right? Because again, it saw itself as the antithesis of what Rococo was. There's also a concept known as the heroic male, nude or otherwise, often nude, right? This is I'll come back to that. This is this central heroic male character, with a few exceptions that we'll get into, that is focused on as the standard bearer. That is the one you should look to. That is the one who is the example for what you should do with your life, things of that nature. Then there's planarity. Planarity is a new word for you, I imagine. So let's explain. Planarity is when in a painting, the objects and figures are parallel to the picture plane. Right? What do I mean? The picture plane would be the flatness of whatever the piece of artwork has been done on. The flatness of the canvas, the flatness of the wall. In the case of whatever screen you're looking at, the flatness that is the surface of the screen, right? And planarity is when you take all of the characters, all of the important elements, and line them up so that they all feel like they're parallel to that flatness of the surface that the painting is done on. Like in the painting that you can see down here, right? Where the flatness of the surface would be the flatness, the surface of the painting itself. In your case, it's the surface of your screen. And all of the people are lined up in such a way that they are perfectly parallel to that, right? If this is the flatness of the screen, let's do it this way. If this is the flatness of the screen or the surface of the painting, all of the people are lined up perfectly with it back here, right? Like this. Turn it this way though. So they're all, it's as if everybody's just lined up like they were lined up for, I don't know, getting in line in kindergarten, right? That kind of a thing. Then there's this clean, crisp style to neoclassicism. Neoclassicism loves hard edges, right? You look at that painting there to the right again, and there's none of that softness that we saw in the Rococo. And they're like primary colors. You're going to see reds, blues, yellows, right? Not those nice, creamy, soft pastels of the Rococo. When we're talking sculpture, they attain that through really highly polished marble. We're not going to look at any of their sculpture, which is why I don't have that highlighted. And a simplicity of geometric forms when it comes to architecture, right? When it comes to architecture, they want simple squares, rectangles, triangles, stuff like that. And if there's any adornment, that adornment is usually going to be based on ancient Greek and Roman models, columns, domes, things of that nature.